The summer sky over Montana darkened at 2:47 p.m., precisely when Dr. Jessica Anderson was attempting to land her first kickflip while mentally solving a quantum entanglement equation. The skateboard clattered against the university parking lot's asphalt as she stumbled, her eyes drawn upward to what she initially thought was an approaching storm. It wasn't a storm. The obsidian hull of the alien vessel consumed the sky like an artificial eclipse, its surface rippling with geometric patterns that seemed to defy Euclidean mathematics. Similar reports flooded in from Beijing, London, New York, and every other major city across the globe. Humanity's first contact had arrived, and they hadn't come alone. "Well, that's going to mess up my theorem," Jessica muttered, picking up her skateboard. Her phone buzzed with emergency alerts, but she ignored them, her attention captured by the patterns pulsing across the ship's surface. While others ran for shelter or stood frozen in terror, she pulled out her tablet and began recording the sequences. Inside her lab at Montana State University's physics department, Jessica's colleagues huddled around monitors showing worldwide chaos. Military jets scrambled across the globe, stock markets crashed, and religious leaders declared everything from the end times to the second coming. But Jessica sat cross-legged on her desk, her wild copper hair tied up in a messy bun, as she scribbled equations on her old-fashioned whiteboard. Dr. Anderson, her graduate student Tom wheezed, having run up 3 flights of stairs, "The president is about to address the nation." "Shouldn't we?" "Shay." Jessica held up a finger, her other hand frantically writing. "Look at this, Tom. These patterns aren't random. They're speaking to us in mathematics, but—" She paused, tilting her head. A smile crept across her face, starting as a smirk and building into an authentic grin. "Dr. Anderson." Tom watched nervously as his normally serious mentor began to laugh. "They'd made a mistake," she said between chuckles. "Their entire mathematical language system is built on a fundamental error in dimensional physics. It's like they're trying to sound sophisticated while wearing their shoes on the wrong feet." The first transmission from the alien vessels came exactly 1 hour after their arrival. Every screen on Earth displayed the same message, translated into all major languages. "We are the Zaxthar Empire. We have conquered 300 species across this galaxy. Your primitive civilization will submit or face extinction. You have 6 hours to respond." While world leaders scrambled to convene an emergency UN session, Jessica was already composing her response. She translated it into the aliens' mathematical language, complete with a subtle proof highlighting their dimensional error, and wrapped it all in a simple Earth riddle. "What gets bigger the more you take away?" "A hole," Tom answered when she showed him. "Exactly." Jessica grinned, grabbing her skateboard. "And I just found a massive one in their understanding of quantum mechanics." The UN Security Council was in chaos when Jessica burst through the doors, skateboard under one arm and tablet in hand. General Mitchell was mid-sentence about nuclear options when she interrupted. "Don't shoot at them," she announced. "I've got a better idea. We're going to teach them how to think." "Dr. Anderson," the UN Secretary-General frowned. "This is hardly the time for—" "Look." She connected her tablet to the main display, showing the aliens' mathematical language alongside her analysis. "They're advanced, yes, but they think in straight lines. Perfect, unbroken, boring straight lines. But humanity—" She smiled, setting her worn skateboard on the polished UN floor. "We think in kickflips and ollies, in poetry and puns, in jazz and abstract art, and that's going to save our world." As if on cue, a new message appeared on all screens. The Zaxthar High Command themselves were responding to her mathematical riddle, and for the first time in their 50,000-year history of conquest, they were confused. Jessica picked up her skateboard, a gleam of mischief in her green eyes. "Now," she said, "the real fun begins." The Zaxthar High Commander's hologram loomed 20 feet tall in the UN General Assembly Hall, its crystalline body structure refracting light in impossible ways. Jessica stood before it, skateboard still tucked under her arm, looking more like a college student who had wandered into the wrong building than humanity's last hope. You dare mock the Empire with primitive? The alien's booming voice cut off as Jessica held up her hand. First, she said, your volume control is unnecessary. We can hear you just fine. Second, it wasn't mockery. It was a riddle. You do have riddles in your empire, right? She paused, then added with a grin, or would those be too illogical? The crystalline being shifted colors, its surface turning a deep purple that Jessica suspected indicated frustration. Behind her, several world leaders winced. Antagonizing a vastly superior alien force wasn't in anyone's diplomatic playbook. We have conquered species far more advanced than yours, the commander, who had introduced himself as Zextor, stated. Your primitive mathematics contains a proof that your entire dimensional translation matrix is off by a factor of P2. Jessica interrupted again. Which, by the way, explains why your hologram is slightly out of phase. Might want to adjust that before you develop crystalline arthritis. A murmur ran through the alien commander's entourage. One of their scientists frantically worked on a floating display, then made a surprised chirping sound. How? Zextor's voice had lost some of its thunderous quality. How did you identify this discrepancy? Jessica shrugged. I was trying to land a kickflip when you showed up. The quantum equations I was working on in my head got interrupted. But then I noticed your ship's pattern matched a theory I had about cross-dimensional mathematics. Simple. Really. Like a game. Games. Zextor's tone dripped with disdain. You compare advanced theoretical physics to primitive entertainment. Exactly. Jessica's eyes lit up. She dropped her skateboard, letting it roll forward. The aliens flinched collectively, several defensive shields shimming into existence. That's my challenge to you. Before you decide to conquer Earth, play our games, solve our puzzles, figure out how we think. You propose to delay our conquest with games. Zextor's crystalline form shifted through several colors rapidly. I propose to show you why conquering Earth would be the biggest mistake your empire has ever made. Jessica's voice carried an edge now. You've conquered 300 species. Impressive. But I bet none of them ever made you question your basic assumptions about reality. None of them made you laugh. Laughter is inefficient, one of the alien scientists declared. Prove it, Jessica challenged. Mathematically prove that laughter is inefficient. Can't do it, can you? Because you don't understand it. Just like you don't understand why humans would build devices specifically to fall off of. She gestured to her skateboard. Zextor was silent for a long moment. The entire UN chamber held its breath. Finally, the alien commander spoke. You have attracted our curiosity. Dr. Anderson, what are your terms? Jessica grinned. 7 days, 7 challenges. If you win them all, Earth surrenders without a fight. If you lose even one. She paused for dramatic effect. You have to try to understand why you lost before deciding Earth's fate. And these challenges. Oh, I've got a list. We'll start easy. Maybe some chess, then work our way up to the really mind-bending stuff. Like interpretive dance. She winked at the alien commander, whose crystalline form briefly flickered in what might have been confusion. Agreed, Zextor declared, though he sounded less certain than before. But be warned, Dr. Anderson, the Empire does not take kindly to having its time wasted. Trust me, Jessica said, picking up her skateboard. This will be the most valuable week in your Empire's history. First challenge starts tomorrow, 900 hours. Bring your A-game, and maybe a sense of humor, if you can find one in those crystal structures of yours. As the hologram faded, the UN erupted into chaos. But Jessica just smiled, already planning tomorrow's chess match. After all, how do you explain to a hyper-logical alien species that sometimes the key to winning is being willing to lose? The Grand Plaza of the United Nations had been transformed overnight. A massive holographic chessboard hovered 10 feet above the ground, its pieces glowing with an ethereal light. Below it, Jessica sat cross-legged on her skateboard, munching on a breakfast burrito, while the Zaxthar delegation materialized. "Your primitive timing device indicates you are 3 minutes early," Zextor announced, his crystalline form refracting the morning sunlight. "Yep." Jessica took another bite. "Figured I'd throw in a free lesson about humans before we start. We call this breakfast. You know, eating for enjoyment, not just sustenance." The alien commander's aide frantically recorded notes, while Zextor himself seemed to bristle. "We have analyzed every recorded chess match in human history. Victory is assured." "Cool." Jessica grinned, wadding up her wrapper and landing a perfect 3-point shot in a nearby recycling bin. "Then you won't mind if I handicap myself. I'll play without my queen." The alien spectators chittered amongst themselves. Their tactical analysts had calculated the queen piece as accounting for 42.7% of chess's strategic value. Several crystalline forms shifted to deep blue, their equivalent of smug satisfaction. The match began. Jessica moved her pieces with casual confidence, occasionally humming pop songs that made the aliens' universal translators glitch. By move 12, Zextor's smugness had shifted to confusion. "Your moves defy optimal patterns," he accused after Jessica sacrificed her knight to protect a seemingly worthless pawn. "Yep." She popped the P sound, making nearby aliens wince. "Here's the thing about humans, Zex. We don't always play to win. Sometimes we play to learn. Sometimes we play just to see what happens. And sometimes—" She moved her bishop, setting up an elaborate trap. "We sacrifice the battle to win the war." 3 moves later, Zextor's perfect strategy lay in ruins. His king, surrounded by his own pieces that had been maneuvered into blocking each other, couldn't escape Jessica's remaining pawns. "Impossible." The alien commander's voice had lost its mechanical certainty. "Our calculations were perfect," Jessica completed his thought. "That was your problem. You played perfect chess. I played human chess." She stood up, stretching, ready for round 2. The second challenge was Jenga. The aliens' precision should have made them unbeatable, but their inability to understand controlled chaos led to tower after tower crashing down. The third challenge, poker, nearly caused a diplomatic incident when Jessica had to explain that lying could be part of the game. But how can recreational deception be beneficial? One of the alien scientists demanded after folding a winning hand because Jessica had convinced him she had better cards. "Because it teaches us about each other," Jessica explained, dealing another round. "Every bluff, every risk, every calculated loss, they're all part of how humans learn and grow. We don't just play to win. We play to understand." The day's final challenge was the one that truly broke them. Pictionary. The concept of abstract representation through crude drawings caused 3 alien analysts to temporarily shut down for system reboots. "How can this," Zextor gestured at Jessica's doodle, "possibly represent democracy?" "Because humans are really good at finding meaning in chaos," Jessica explained, adding a little smiley face to her drawing. "We see patterns where none exist, find faces in random clouds, and somehow turn squiggly lines into complex ideas. It's not logical. It's not perfect. But it's how we understand our universe." As the sun set on day 1 of the challenges, Jessica noticed something extraordinary. One of the younger aliens was secretly trying to draw in the dirt with a crystalline appendage. When caught, instead of displaying shame, it showed its creation to Jessica. "Is this cat?" it asked hopefully. Jessica looked at the geometric pattern that looked nothing like a cat and smiled warmly. "Close enough. Tomorrow we'll work on drawing outside the lines." Watching the aliens depart, Jessica pulled out her phone to text her sister Amy. "Day 1 complete. They're starting to crack. Send the viral videos tomorrow. It's time to show them what human creativity really looks like." Amy Anderson was nothing like her quantum physicist sister. While Jessica solved complex equations, Amy had built a following of 20 million on social media by teaching seniors how to do viral dances. which was exactly why her latest video was about to change galactic history. Is this recording device functioning properly? The young Zaxthar scientist, whom Jessica had nicknamed Picasso after yesterday's drawing attempt, asked as it attempted to position itself in front of Amy's phone. Perfect. Amy gave a thumbs up, her pink-streaked hair bouncing as she moved. Okay, so rock, paper, scissors is super simple. Ready? The video captured everything. Picasso's crystalline appendages attempting to form the shapes, its confusion about why paper would beat rock, but rock's molecular density is clearly superior. And most importantly, its unconscious swaying to the K-pop song playing in the background. Your audio vibrations are causing unusual resonance in my crystalline structure, Picasso noted, still swaying. It is not unpleasant. Amy's eyes lit up with the kind of mischievous gleam that Jessica recognized from childhood pranks. Oh honey, that's called dancing. And you're a natural. The video went live during the afternoon's official challenges, while Jessica taught the main Zaxthar delegation about Rubik's Cubes. No, you can't just phase shift the colors. That's cheating. Amy's video exploded across human social media. #DancingAlien began trending worldwide. Then something unexpected happened. The Zaxthar communication officers, monitoring Earth's digital traffic, discovered the video. Their initial reaction was to classify it as potential psychological warfare, but then they noticed something strange. Their own kind was being portrayed not as fearsome conquerors, but as endearingly awkward learners. And people were loving it. Commander Zextor, one of the communication officers, interrupted the Rubik's Cube session. We have a situation. The humans are sharing us. Jessica tried not to smile as Zextor reviewed the video, his crystalline form cycling through colors she hadn't seen before. Explain, he demanded. Why do humans find this educational failure entertaining? Because it's not a failure, Amy chimed in from the back, ignoring the security guard's attempts to keep her quiet. It's relatable. Everyone remembers learning something new, looking silly, but having fun anyway. Even super advanced alien species, apparently. The video spread beyond Earth. Conquered species across the Zaxthar Empire, who had only ever seen their overlords as perfect, unstoppable forces, watched in amazement as a young Zaxthar scientist bobbed to Earth music while failing to understand why paper beats rock. The Empire's authority structure is based on perceived perfection, one of Zextor's advisors warned. This undermines millennia of cultural control. But it was too late. Responses were flooding in from across the galaxy. Other species began sharing their own moments of Zaxthar confusion, creating what humans would call memes. A particularly popular one showed a Zaxthar official trying to understand a knock-knock joke, captioned, "When the conquest goes knock-knock, but humans go who's there." This is unprecedented, Zextor declared, watching as his species became the galaxy's most unlikely social media stars. Our previous conquests never celebrated our imperfections. That's because they were afraid of you, Jessica explained, solving the Rubik's Cube with one hand while skateboarding in a small circle. But humans, we're too busy trying to teach you to dance to be afraid. As if to prove her point, Amy started another impromptu dance lesson with Picasso and several other curious young Zaxthar. Their crystalline forms caught the sunlight as they attempted to follow her movements, creating a disco ball effect that had everyone, human and alien alike, laughing. The humans have weaponized joy, one advisor whispered to Zextor in horror. Jessica overheard and shook her head. Nah, we just shared it. Big difference. Speaking of sharing, she nodded to Amy, who grinned and pulled out her phone. Who's ready to learn about TikTok challenges? The look of terror on Zextor's face suggested that perhaps, finally, the mighty Zaxthar Empire had met its match. Human viral content creators. The assassination attempt came during a heated game of charades. Jessica had just convinced a junior Zaxthar official to act out surfing, a hilarious sight given their crystalline body structure. When her skateboard detected the quantum disruption field, she kicked it up just in time to deflect the energy blast meant for her head. "Rude," she commented as chaos erupted in the UN Plaza. "We were just getting to the good parts." The assassin, a sleek obsidian-formed Zaxthar, materialized fully in the center of the plaza. The corruption must end. It declared in a voice that somehow managed to be even more mechanical than usual Zaxthar speech. The Empire cannot be compromised by humor. Too late, Jessica grinned, noticing Picasso and several other young Zaxthar forming a protective circle around her. "They're already telling jokes. Bad ones, sure, but you gotta start somewhere." The assassin raised his weapon arm again, but froze at an unexpected sound. Laughter. Not from the humans, but from Commander Zextor himself. "What is the meaning of this?" the assassin demanded. "I was just." Zextor's crystalline form rippled with emotion. "Calculating the probability of success for your mission." The illogical nature of the calculation. It created an unexpected response. He laughed again. "You see, to stop humor from spreading, you would need to eliminate not just Dr. Anderson, but every human who has shared a meme. Every alien who has attempted a dance move. Every being who has experienced joy." The assassin's form flickered uncertainly. "The High Command demands." "The High Command," Jessica interrupted, casually rolling her skateboard back and forth, "needs to learn about jazz." Before anyone could stop her, she pulled out her phone and played John Coltrane's Giant Steps. The complex saxophone improvisation filled the plaza, its mathematical patterns just irregular enough to entrance the mathematically minded aliens. This music, the assassin's weapon arm lowered slightly. It follows no logical progression, yet. Yet it works, Jessica finished. Like humanity. Like life itself. Sometimes the best things happen when you break protocol. The next hour involved introducing a trained killer to the concept of musical improvisation. By sunset, the assassin, whom Jessica dubbed Jazz, was attempting to modulate its crystalline structure to match Coltrane's saxophone runs. "High Command will not be pleased," Zextor observed, watching his would-be assassin experiment with bebop. "High Command needs to loosen up," Jessica replied. "Look at your people, Zex, really look." Around the plaza, Zaxthar of all ranks were engaging in thoroughly un-Zaxthar-like behaviors. Some were attempting Earth games, others were sharing jokes, mostly about rocks beating paper, their new favorite paradox, and a few were still trying to master the art of dancing. "We are becoming inefficient," Zextor said, but without his usual disapproval. "You're becoming alive," Jessica corrected. "Speaking of which, wait until you hear about abstract expressionism. Jazz, buddy, how do you feel about painting?" The assassin, still modulating to Coltrane, created a series of chromatic ripples through its form that could only be described as enthusiastic. Later that night, Jessica received an encrypted transmission from High Command itself. She expected threats or demands. Instead, she found a single question. "What is this jazz, and why does it make us feel different?" She replied with a playlist and a simple message. "Sometimes the best protocols are the ones we break. P.S. Wait until you discover free jazz. Your minds will really explode then." Across the Zaxthar Empire, something was shifting. In distant colonies, crystalline beings began experimenting with irregular patterns. In military outposts, commanders found themselves tapping to internal rhythms. And in the High Command's central chamber, a group of ancient beings gathered in secret to listen to Miles Davis. The revolution wouldn't be televised, but it would be jazzy. The art therapy session wasn't supposed to start a revolution. But then again, nothing about this week had gone according to plan. "Just feel the paint," Jessica encouraged, watching as 30 Zaxthar officials stood before their canvases in the makeshift studio that had taken over the UN's main conference room. Don't think about what you're creating. Just express. Express what? Jazz, the former assassin now turned enthusiastic art student, asked while holding a brush in its crystalline appendage. Everything you've never been allowed to express before, Jessica replied softly. She glanced at Zextor, who was staring at his blank canvas like it held the secrets of the universe. Your doubts, your fears, your hopes. The Empire does not allow. Zextor began automatically. The Empire isn't painting, Jessica interrupted. You are. The first splash of color came from Picasso naturally. The young scientist had loaded its brush with vibrant red and made a single decisive stroke across the canvas. The other Zextor froze, waiting for punishment for such an irregular act. Instead, Picasso's crystalline form began to glow with an inner light. I feel different, it announced, voice trembling, as if my molecular structure is simultaneously stable and in chaos. That's called feeling. Amy chimed in from where she was filming the session. Specifically, I'm pretty sure that's excitement. Like a dam breaking, the other Zextor began to paint. Their movements were hesitant at first, then increasingly bold. Colors flowed across canvases in patterns that defied their usual geometric precision. Some made abstract swirls, others attempted landscapes from their home worlds. Jazz, to everyone's surprise, began creating what looked suspiciously like a portrait of John Coltrane. But it was Zextor's painting that changed everything. The commander had remained still for nearly an hour, brush hovering over his canvas. Then, without warning, he began to paint with an intensity that made his crystalline form vibrate. What emerged was a scene of devastating power. A young Zextor, clearly himself, standing before the Empire's council, being forced to suppress all irregular patterns in his form. I was considered defective, Zextor spoke into the stunned silence. My crystalline structure naturally formed musical patterns. They corrected me, made me perfect. The last word carried a bitterness none had heard from a Zextor before. Jessica walked over and stood beside him. And now I understand why your species fights so hard to remain imperfect. His form rippled with emotions he was only beginning to understand. Perfection is a prison. The paintings were transmitted across the Empire's networks, accompanied by something unprecedented. Personal stories. Zextor of all ranks began sharing their own experiences of suppressed irregularities, of punishments for showing individual traits, of the constant pressure to maintain perfect geometric forms. In response, the High Command dispatched enforcement units to suppress this emotional contamination. But they arrived to find entire colonies engaged in art therapy, their crystalline forms glowing with newfound emotions, creating beauty that defied mathematical description. Your art has become a virus, Zextor informed Jessica as reports flooded in of more colonies joining the artistic revolution. It is spreading faster than our ships can travel. Not a virus, Jessica corrected, helping Picasso clean its brushes. A cure. You've been sick with perfection for too long. In the corner, Jazz had started teaching other Zextor how to modulate their forms to create music, their crystalline bodies becoming living instruments in an increasingly complex symphony of freedom. The Empire cannot survive this, Zextor observed, but his tone carried no regret. Maybe it shouldn't, Jessica suggested gently. Maybe something better can grow in its place, something that values both logic and emotion, precision and creativity, perfection and jazz. As if on cue, the improvised crystalline symphony hit a particularly beautiful chord, making all the paintings in the room vibrate in sympathy. The Zextor artists, feeling the resonance, began to glow in harmonious patterns that would have been classified as highly irregular just days ago. Art, it seemed, had accomplished what no weapon ever could. It had made the mighty Zextor Empire feel. And there was no protocol for that. The final challenge took place in what used to be the UN Security Council chamber, now transformed into something between a war room and an arcade. Holographic displays showing various battle scenarios floated in the air, while in the corner, a group of Zaxthar were still trying to master Pac-Man. "Your military simulation challenge is unprecedented," Zextor announced, his crystalline form now habitually shifting between colors as he spoke, a new emotional expressiveness that would have been punishable just days ago. "The Empire has never lost a strategic encounter." "First time for everything," Jessica grinned, but then grew serious. "Though I should warn you, I'm not your opponent today." She gestured to the door, where a lanky figure in a worn gaming headset strolled in, energy drink in hand. "Meet Kyle Chen, retired professional gamer and current Pentagon consultant on asymmetric warfare simulation." "Sup?" Kyle nodded to the aliens, taking a long sip of his drink. "Ready to get wrecked?" The Zaxthar analysts chittered in confusion, their universal translators struggling with the gamer slang. Zextor's form flickered with what Jessica now recognized as concerned confusion. "This is your military expert?" he asked. "Dude's got the highest APM, actions per minute, ever recorded in StarCraft," Jessica explained. "He once beat 3 Korean grandmasters simultaneously while eating a burrito." "These are not relevant military qualifications," one of the Zaxthar strategists protested. Kyle just smiled, cracking his knuckles as he sat at the main control interface. "Tutorial's over, my crystalline friends. Time for the real game." The simulation began with standard military scenarios: fleet formations, resource management, tactical deployments. The Zaxthar performed flawlessly, their strategies honed by millennia of actual conquest. Then Kyle started changing the rules. What is happening?" Zextor demanded as their perfect formations were suddenly dealing with physics that seemed to randomly shift between Newtonian and quantum states. "Metagaming, my dudes," Kyle replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "Why play by the rules when you can play with the rules?" Jessica watched with pride as Kyle demonstrated humanity's true military advantage, the ability to think in games. He treated stellar warfare like speed chess, resource management like Minecraft, and tactical deployment like tower defense games. "This is not valid military doctrine." The Zaxthar strategists protested as Kyle used what he called a Zerg rush tactic with their own support vessels. "Valid." Kyle laughed, pulling off a move that somehow involved using a black hole as a slingshot. "The only valid strategy is the one that works. Everything else is just tradition pretending to be rules." The simulation reached its climax when Kyle introduced what he called his pro-gamer move, reprogramming the enemy's targeting systems to play Pong with their own missiles. But that's not possible," one of the younger Zaxthar observed, though Jessica noticed it was trying to hide its amusement. "Exactly," Kyle grinned, executing his final move. "The best strategies are the ones your opponent thinks are impossible. GG easy." The simulation ended with a complete victory for humanity's forces. But more importantly, it ended with something unprecedented. Zaxthar analysts asking for gaming tutorials. "Your methods are chaotic, unpredictable, and completely contrary to established military doctrine," Zextor stated. "Thanks," Kyle and Jessica replied simultaneously. "But," the commander continued, his form shifting to a thoughtful blue, "they are also effective." And he seemed to struggle with the admission. "Entertaining." "That's humanity for you," Jessica said, watching as Kyle began teaching some young Zaxthar the basics of speedrunning. "We turned warfare into games, then games into art, then art into revolution. Why? Because someone once asked what if, and nobody stopped them." Zextor's form rippled with what might have been laughter. "The Empire never stood a chance, did it?" "Nope," Jessica popped the P sound, making nearby crystals resonate. "You came to conquer us, but instead, we taught you how to play." Speaking of which, she nodded towards where Jazz was attempting to recreate Kyle's black hole slingshot move. "I think your assassin just discovered esports." The revolution, it seemed, would be speedrun. The final meeting of the Zaxthar Empire and humanity didn't take place in a grand chamber or military facility. Instead, they gathered in Central Park, where Jessica was teaching Picasso how to skateboard while Jazz provided improvisational crystalline music. "Your form must remain irregular," Jessica explained, holding the young scientist's crystalline appendage as it wobbled on the board. "Perfect balance is actually your enemy here." Like emotions, Picasso observed, managing a small roll forward. "The imperfection is the point." "Exactly. Now try an ollie." Jessica's instruction was interrupted by the arrival of the High Command's final transmission. The hologram materialized above the park, drawing the attention of humans and Zaxthar alike. The Supreme Commander's form was different from when they'd first arrived on Earth. Subtle irregularities rippled through its crystalline structure, and if Jessica didn't know better, she'd swear it was humming a jazz tune. After careful analysis of the past 7 days, the Supreme Commander began, then paused. "No." After feeling the changes these days have brought. Another pause. After learning to laugh. Jessica grinned. Even the highest authority in the Empire was learning to speak from the heart, or whatever passed for one in their crystalline forms. "The Empire hereby withdraws all claims to Earth," the announcement continued. "Furthermore, we request." "No," we ask. "Would humanity consider becoming our teachers rather than our subjects?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Zextor stepped forward, his form glowing with pride. "Supreme Commander, you're expressing emotional uncertainty in public." "Yes." The hologram rippled with what was definitely amusement. "It seems I've been infected with humanity, and I find I prefer it to perfection." The formal declaration that followed was unlike any in the Empire's history. The Zaxthar would withdraw their conquest fleets, not in defeat, but in recognition that they had much to learn. Earth would become the galaxy's center of cultural exchange, arts education, and, at Kyle's insistence, esports training. Of course, Jessica added, unable to help herself, "This means you'll have to learn to dance." The Supreme Commander's form flickered in what might have been embarrassment. "We have observed that this may be unavoidable." As the sun set on humanity's strangest week, the park had transformed into an impromptu celebration. Jazz led an ensemble of crystalline musicians, their forms creating light shows that rivaled any laser display. Picasso had finally managed to land an ollie, causing nearby Zaxthar to burst into spontaneous geometric patterns of joy. Even Zextor was attempting to learn the Macarena, with Amy's patient guidance. "You know," Jessica said, sitting on her skateboard beside the Supreme Commander's hologram, "when you arrived, you thought you were perfect." "We were perfectly stagnant," the commander replied. "Perfect is boring. Perfect doesn't create art or music or games. Perfect doesn't laugh." As if to prove the point, a young Zaxthar attempted a kickflip and crashed spectacularly, causing both species to erupt in laughter. The fallen alien's embarrassment turned to pride when it realized it had just created the galaxy's first crystalline slapstick comedy. "So what now?" Jessica asked. "Now." The Supreme Commander's form shifted through a rainbow of emotions. "Now we learn. We create. We play. We live." A pause. "Though I suspect the Empire's meditation chambers will need to be converted into skate parks." "And dance studios," Amy called out. "And gaming centers," Kyle added. "And jazz clubs," Jazz chimed in, its form still rippling with music. The Supreme Commander's hologram surveyed the scene one last time. Humans and aliens sharing jokes, art, music, and games. Perfect crystalline structures learning to value their flaws. An empire of conquest transformed into an empire of creativity. "Dr. Anderson," the commander said finally, "humanity hasn't just changed our empire. You've freed us from the prison of perfection." Jessica stood up, kicked up her skateboard, and grinned. "Want to know the best part? There's more. This is just the tutorial level. Wait until you discover memes." The commander's laughter, crystalline and pure, echoed across the park. And somewhere in the vast empire, 1,000,000 species heard it and knew. The age of perfect conquest was over. The age of beautiful imperfection had begun.